Good evening, this is Eva. I'm going to be talking about redemption and resilience tonight, and I'm going to start it off with a Bible verse. This is James 12, oh no, I can't read it. James 1, 2 through 4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know the testing of your faith proves steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And here's the other one I was going to do. My glasses are already dirty. Hold on. Sorry. Though you have, 1 Peter 1, 8 to 9. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Though you do not see him, you believe in him. And rejoice with joy that he is inexpressible, and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Though you do not now see him, you believe in him, and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible, and you're filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. All right, that was better. Sorry, it's been a day. I tried to film this earlier at the by this place I always walk, and it was just too noisy. There was like a bunch of what do you call lawn care stuff going on, and people had too many machines and stuff. It was too loud. All right, tonight I'm going to be talking about, well, I mean, I already told you what I'm talking about, but I'm going to use a couple books. One of them was pretty popular. It was made into a movie by Angelina Jolie. She was the director, and it's called Unbroken, and it was a pretty famous book before. It's by Laura Hillenbrand, who also wrote Seabiscuit, and she interviewed the guy it's about extensively for this, and he also co-directed the film about his life. And the book's really cool because it's got a bunch of like black and white photos through the whole thing. And I mean, his life is literally the most interesting life ever. I don't even understand how someone could have had this much going on in one lifetime. It almost reads like someone with 3 different lives because they're so full. And he is unimaginable how he got through all this. He's just ridiculously inspiring in every good way. When they were doing the film, he was, I think it was like 92 or something, but he started off Italian American, and he hung out with a lot of, I guess, the wrong crowd in his neighborhood, and he started doing petty crimes and stealing and getting in trouble with the law. And he was kind of a punk. And then his brother convinced him that he needed to get out of the lifestyle because it was messing up his future. So he actually listened, and his brother really liked running, and so he encouraged him, because Louis was a better runner, to go ahead and start training for, he started off low level, and he became an Olympic runner, and he was in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, and he actually met Hitler, which is a very strange aside, but like Hitler said something, I don't know, like clever, like, oh, you're the fast runner or something. Very strange. But he came back to his hometown a hero, but right about that time was when, you know, the World War II was getting into a more heated state. So he volunteered to be in the Air Force, and he left, and he became a pilot. And he had one scrape with almost getting killed on one of his missions, and then after that they retired the plane that he had been using, and then his superiors wanted him to go on another mission, but he said they didn't think that there was another plane that they could use, and they came up with this plane out of nowhere that hadn't fully passed inspection, but they were like, oh, it's fine, you'll be fine. So he and his crew went on over the Pacific, and they were a little concerned because it was a mission that required being at sea, going over the sea for a long period of time, like a lot of flying over water instead of land. And when they were midway through their flight, they got hit by the Japanese, and I think by the time the plane crashed, it had sustained 500 bullets. So 11 crew members passed away. No, that's not right. There were 11. Were there 11 total? And 8 passed away. Yeah, that's right. So it was Louis, a guy he was kind of friends with, and a third guy he didn't know that well. And they got out those, collapsible dinghies, and they had 2 of them. The problem was that the things that would normally be on them, like the food rations and the first aid kit and like change of clothes, that kind of thing, blankets, that was all burned up in the plane crash. So they took what they could, which wasn't much, and they went ahead and got in the dinghies, and they thought they would get picked up, at some point, but they saw a plane, I think it was like on the 3rd day, but it didn't pick them up, it didn't see them. Then, while they were on the boat, obviously they were running out of water, and so they had very low water rations, and they had some chocolate candy that had been saved from the crash. They were splitting it, in small increments, and then one of the 3 guys, I think his nickname was Mel, he ate the rest of the chocolate when the other 2 were asleep, and he said he just did it out of fear. But in a way, it's like that kind of caused his demise, because he was so guilty about that. They said he never really recovered from that weak moment. So they ended up having to drop him overboard because he passed away from the stress, the anxiety of what they had to go through. Because they were literally, this is insane, they were literally on those boats, inflatable rafts, basically, for 47 days. So that's pretty shocking that they made it. And the last part of it, one of the dinghies had gotten holes in it because they constantly had sharks coming, getting interested in them, and they would kick them in the in the nose area, or punch them, and they would go away. They at one point caught 2 baby sharks, or just little sharks, and they ended up eating their livers, and that was something that sustained them. They had an albatross that they caught and tried to eat, and they ate raw fish. But the albatross made them sick, so they ended up using parts of its meat as fish bait. And they were hallucinating a lot of the time, obviously, because they were under the hot sun. They're getting boils and just burned all the way down, and they had to go crouch in the back part of the boat because they were constantly feeling things bumping against them underneath, and they didn't know what kind of fish it was, and they were very fearful of being capsized. So on the 47th day, a plane did spot them and came down to rescue them. Unfortunately, it was not who they wanted, and it was the Japanese. So Mela, like I said, had already died. So the 2 guys that were left, so that's 2 out of 11 who survived, they both ended up at a POW prison, so they were prisoners of war. And at first they were treated rather well, and they thought it was going to be, fairly okay. But that didn't last long, and the main guy that pretty much Louis, did I say his name? Louis, no, I didn't say his name. Louis Zamperini. Yeah, you can tell he's Italian. Okay, so they found out just by his name and listening to the radio that he had been an Olympic star. I mean, he'd done really well. He got 8th place in the main race, but then he passed some record afterwards, beat some record, and so he was, known in the public. So they did use him to send some messages, but it was more like propaganda stuff. And he got singled out by this one guy at the prison who he targeted him because he was an Olympian, and because he was an American. And his nickname through the whole book is called the Bird. And he was just basically this sadistic guy who just made his life a living hell. I mean, a lot of the story is focused on the relationship between those two, and he did terrible things to many people, but he would, and I think at one point he gets a promotion, and so Louis thinks that he finally is gonna not have to deal with him, but he ends up transferring to where Louis is, and so he finds him again, and he torments him by doing nutty things. At one point he has him stand while every other inmate has to punch him, so he got punched 250 times. And other things he did to him, he would just make him eat basically tainted food or garbage, or hardly give him any water. He would just beat him relentlessly, or he would you know, whenever they were all out in public together, you know, he would target him and humiliate him in front of the other people who were also being held. His friend, they did try to keep up, but they tried to keep them pretty far away from each other. But the other guy did survive the whole ordeal and ended up going back and marrying his girlfriend, and I think he became a teacher. Let's see, what else? Oh, yeah. They called his plane a flying casket. I mean, they made those jokes before it crashed. Let's see. This was in the 1936 is when he did the Olympics in Berlin. So, as the story goes, one of the pivotal scenes is when he and the bird are having this kind of competitive showdown, and the bird makes him take this metal, I don't know what you want to call it, like a rod or beam, and he has to hold it over his head, and he manages to do it for 37 minutes, which is pretty remarkable, because the bird was saying, you know, if he dropped it, he would kill him. So, I mean, as you can see, he's just constantly under psychological, physical, you know, mental anguish. And, I mean, he's tested, like, his will to live is basically tested 24/7. The other thing that the bird didn't like about him is his story about how he had, you know, rags to riches story, where he had, you know, come up and accomplished so much. There is, what else do I want to say about this? When he leaves, he's basically freed by the war ending, and they all came and released everybody in there. He goes back home, but the problem is he has horrendous PTSD, which of course that's not surprising considering everything he went through. And so he ends up, he said the worst part of his PTSD was nightmares. He would have horrendous nightmares about the bird. And he couldn't shake them, so he ended up drinking a lot, and he became an alcoholic, and then he was verbally abusive to his wife, and so she finally left him. He didn't have children at that point. He was in a really bad way for quite a while. Like, people still respected him because of his service, but inwardly he was just shell of who he was. It's like he let everything sort of get to him because, you know, they didn't know that much about PTSD back then, and it was more like, you know, just, you're a man, you know, just stuff your feelings. So he was so numb and checked out that his wife, before she left, encouraged him to go with her to this Billy Graham, I don't know, revival festival or something. And he liked so much what Billy Graham said that he became a born-again Christian. And one thing that happened when he was on the raft, he had made some vow to God at that point when he thought they wouldn't be rescued. And he said, I will devote the rest of my life to you if I get out of this hell. And so he remembered that promise he'd made, and so he ended up devoting his life to Christianity. He ended up he found like a lot of the soldiers from the enemy side who had, caused him so much grief, and he forgave them. He had this long letter to give to the bird, but when he went to where he lived, he refused to see him. The bird actually ended up, I can't say his real name, it's too long. He ended up killing himself, and then later Louis finds out that he had this contentious relationship with his father, and it sounded very like abusive, so I guess there's a chance that he had carried that sort of abuse that he had gone through and then enacted it out on the prisoners under his watch. Let's see what else. I just felt really drawn to this story because it's just so remarkable. I think there's a Civil War movie, Cold Mountain. It was also a book many book clubs did, and I think Jude Law played the main character. I want to say Nicole Kidman and Renee Zellweger were in it as like pioneer type women, and that's one book I read where I was like, what the heck? Because it was much like this, the plot, where it's like, he was like a soldier during the Civil War, and like literally he would go from one situation, I think he was almost buried alive at one point, one situation to the, and literally as soon as he got out of that, something else incredibly, trying would happen to him, and he would have to then get through that. And it was just like, it just got ridiculous. Like he literally could never catch a break. So this isn't the only story like that, but it is kind of fascinating because, a lot of it must be true, because they had the guy, Louis himself, checking the book and the movie, so he was giving his, he was so involved in it. It's like they weren't making stuff up like a lot of times movie translations will do with a book if the person it's about isn't around. All right, what else did I want to? I'm sorry, I'm tired. I guess what I did want to say and why I wanted to do this is I watched a movie the other night with my son, and it was what was it called? The White Tiger. And it was about a man in India who became a servant for this wealthy family, and he was so mistreated by his boss and the boss's family that he ends up seeking revenge on them and trying to steal a huge amount of money so that he can sort of go off and have a life for himself. But he's made to, like, the whole first half of the movie, he's made to be, like, very sympathetic character. Like, it doesn't get dark till the second half, and I just felt like, and then it was kind of like, the whole point of the movie was, like, when he employs these sort of the opposite, he acts the opposite, where he's not being his real self. He's not being, I guess, kind or whatever to anyone anymore. He just becomes kind of ruthless and only thinks about himself, and he's very, like, kind of prideful and everything. And then he actually becomes extraordinarily successful, like, after he murders this boss of his. And it was almost like the whole movie was almost like saying, like he would have just remained in that chain of lower caste system where his life was just never going to amount to anything, and he had no opportunities to get out of his situation, and that, like, he had to keep sending money home to his extended family and back in this, like, very dismal village with hardly any, running water, definitely no electricity. And it was kind of like the whole movie was saying, if he tried to be himself, like, his life was just gonna remain stagnant, and he was just never going to break out of this cruel, repetitive system, basically because of his class. And then, like, when he becomes this kind of no feeling murderer slash thief, entrepreneur, he becomes an entrepreneur. He gets like he buys his own cab company, and like he gets rich that way. And it kind of just made me super depressed after I watched it, because I was just like, so I guess like the message is like becoming human, and then like things will really work out for you. I was just like, I don't understand what is going on in this culture right now, like society. It just seems like everything is so negative, and it feels like if you do things seems like if you do things with a good heart, you're just met with poor quality of life. And if you're ruthless and sort of go with this individualistic system, it's very American. It's like your only chance of like, and then you're very materialistic, that's like your only chance of having happiness, which I personally don't believe in it. I think that's not true. I was raised by my grandparents, and they worked extraordinarily hard. My grandmother, her mom had come over from Norway, had to leave one child back there, and she was married off, and then that man died of tuberculosis, and then she had to fend for 3 little girls by herself, and then they didn't live in a good neighborhood, and they had to sew all their clothes, and, they were in poverty, and my grandmother's basically like a latchkey kid. She had to care for her younger sisters, and this was all like in Chicago, and it was scary and hard, and it's like she ended up being like a doctor's wife, and like ended up studying at the Chicago Art Institute, and she ended up having a pretty incredible life and traveling all around the world, and having a really happy and successful marriage. And it's just that I was raised to think that, my grandfather had he came from one of, I think it was 8 children in Georgia. And, he was an engineer, and then he became a doctor, and then he was a medic during the war. And, he started his own lab, and he was a pathologist, and so was his son, and they had a business together. It's like they worked so hard, and they pulled themselves, out of, circumstances that, I guess my grandfather had it a little bit easier, because even though there were so many more children, there was a cigar, they were part of a cigar company, the family was, or something. And so he sort of did okay. But still, the whole point is that they didn't have to sell out to, have success and to have an income that was, generous. It's like, I just don't believe that. I don't believe that you have to have to be like a dark person or like step all over people to get where you want in life. I don't want to have anything to do with being in that world. I don't like it, and I think it's false, and I don't really want to have anything to do with living in it. Though, of course, there's only one world. But it's just like, I don't really understand what is happening, like, with how things are right now. I don't know if it was the internet or post-COVID or what, but it just seems like the negativity is, like, at an all-time high. And I don't see how people can, like, have hope if they, like, live like that. Like, where's the... What are you living for? I don't really understand. And it seems like bad characteristics are revered, you know, to get ahead, and like everything's about having more material possessions than someone else. It's just like, it's gross. I don't like it. And I guess I really liked this particular book because I thought, like, you know, here's somebody, it's just, they're basically trying to survive, and it's like, it's just more, like, he had a really, really obviously hard, terrible time, but, I mean, his soul was good, his efforts were undeniably the better part of humanity, you know, and no matter what he went through, and then he finally found a way out of punishing himself and other people, you know, like he was very human. He had a really hard time, and he came back because the PTSD basically made him do a lot of things that weren't really in his character. He couldn't handle it, and that's reasonable. I mean, I don't think anybody could handle the thing. I mean, just the first thing, like being on that raft, and you know, thinking sharks are gonna eat you, and I don't know, or you're just gonna be just surrounded by salt water with nothing to drink. I mean, like, it's just unbelievable. And then to think he had to go through that further test. I think he was in a POW camp 2.5 years. I mean, that's unbelievable. And it's like, comparing that person to, like, what is going on lately with the world, I'm still really annoyed at, you know, I shouldn't talk about politics, but let's just say there's a lot of new policies about the disabled that I think it's disgusting. And I think a lot of people are gonna suffer, especially parents and children with, you know, severe disabilities. I think they're gonna be hit especially hard. So I don't think it's for them to deal totally by themselves. I think community, society in general should, like, throw a big fit and, like, try to, like, help them have a voice. I think it's, like, I mean, basically, it's just, I feel like lately, everyone just seems very, like, into their own little, what's going on with their little world, and they're not thinking about the community at large. Or, I mean, there's a lot of people who are report being good people, but it's like, what are they doing for other people to make that statement, like, accurate. I don't know. My grandmother volunteered for, I think it was like 20 years at the downtown Y here, and she taught disabled kids to swim because, you know, my mom had polio, and she got it when she was 8, and she was bedridden for 2 years, and then she had a deformed arm for the rest of her life, her right arm, which was her dominant arm, because if you get a disease like that when your body's still growing, like, that body part is not going to grow. I mean, it was like a withered arm, and it was like a fourth of it but never grew. So it's like it was severely shorter than the other arm because it was paralyzed. So I just don't really get it. I feel like with how much everything costs and like a lot of the political divide and things that are going on with a lot of policies and a lot of groups of people, it's like, feels like things are only going to get worse. So the last thing I was going to talk about was this book, Madame Bovary. Okay, so oh, it's a really dark picture. You can't even really see it. It's just like a woman in, like, I don't know, white Victorian garment. And she's leaning over a piano. But Madame Bovary, the reason I took a gajillion notes. The whole point of bringing up Madame Bovary is that basically she and her husband were just not the best people. I mean, at all. And this book is like, it's a real classic. It's been around forever, but if you actually read it, it's not good. Like, I mean, it was by Flaubert, and like, she's basically, her name's Emma, and she just wants glamour, and she wants money. She basically just wants superficial things, and she wants to get them from a man. And she also, this is like 1837, she also like is obsessed with kind of shallow romances, or having like a lot of attention, or she has like these 2 lovers, and one of them's like definitely a con artist, and the other one is just, I mean, he's very sweet, but I mean, he's not gonna really lower his position in life to deal with a married woman, ultimately, which she doesn't ever seem to understand. And her husband, he's like a provincial doctor in this country town they live in, and they have 1 child. It's a little girl. And he basically, you know, he's just like a family doctor who like makes house calls, right? But this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a moralist society. Basically, his name's Charles. He is like a very mediocre guy. He is extremely interested in status, as is his wife, and material gain, and his title, okay? But that's pretty much it. That's what he sees as self-esteem builders for him. So his wife, who she's had these lovers, and like, I think she asked for money from both of them because she has all these debts because she keeps buying and buying all these dresses. And I think the one guy is basically more a gigolo, and she kind of ends up like helping him have this like furnished apartment in the city so she can go see him. And it's pretty much all done on like promissory notes. I mean, it's very like suspect. And she basically is, she and like the pharmacist, because the pharmacist in town, he wants to be well known for like being medically brilliant, you know, because it feels like just being a pharmacist, people don't really take him seriously. So they both convince Charles to take on this local guy who has a clubfoot. He's a farmer. Has this horribly long name I can't say. I'm going to call him Hyatt because it's like Hayago or something. H-Y. It's really long. I don't know how to say it. And this poor guy. They convince Charles that he should come up with a surgery and cure his clubfoot. And then that'll put him like in all the medical journals and they'll become famous and money will follow. And, you know, Charles is really interested in having, you know, people hold him in high esteem. And he's honestly, like, not really astute medically. It's like he's not trying to learn anything new or extend his practice. I mean, he's very much like a very mediocre character. Anyway, so he says yes to this scheme, and they convince this guy with the club foot, I mean, he's like a young guy, he's like maybe 24, that they'll do this experimental surgery, right? But they know what they're doing, and they, you know, he's going to come up with this new method to cure him. Well, he doesn't do anything but, like, read a book about clubfoot, and that's it. And then he performs the surgery, doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and 5 days after he performs the surgery, it's all swollen. He accidentally cuts his Achilles heel, which, you know, that's a reference to Greek mythology, of course. And this poor man can't even walk. Ends up with gangrene, and obviously it's a botched surgery. It's a failure. So, like, Charles's reputation is ruined, and he doesn't get any money, of course. He actually owes the medical bills for this young man, and then because of the gangrene, he has to have the leg that had the club foot, he has to have it removed by amputation from, like, above the knee, right? So it's horrendous because it was completely unnecessary, and literally the only reason it happened is because they were greedy. And they did not care about what happened to this kid. They never considered really him as a human being. It's like they just considered him like a means to an end. They didn't think about his pain. They just saw him as someone who could uplift them, and he wasn't really a real person to them. And so pretty much, oh, that's his name, Hippole. Okay, so at the end of the book, she gets into more debt. That guy with the amputated leg, he gets a wooden peg leg, and then for some reason he's working in the stables, and everybody can hear him coming because of the peg leg, and it's just, it is so depressing. Pharmacist, of course, wants nothing to do with their plan and pretends like he wasn't part of it. Something happens at the pharmacy. He gets in an argument with somebody there about something, and like Emma, she's eavesdropping that there is some cyanide that's unaccounted for or something, and she sneaks in there and gets it because they trust her. And so she has this idea in her head that like she's read too many books about damsels in distress, and like they just quickly take a pill and then they faint and they, you know, pass away beautifully. But that is not what happens to her, and she is like deathly sick to her stomach. I mean, like in great pain for like 3 days. So she dies this horrible long death, and then like her husband gets in further death trying to like get her help, and it's all for nothing. And in the end, it's like she passes away. He ends up having a heart attack, I think, like a year after her death, because he has to raise this little girl by himself, and like I said, his reputation is trash, and so he's having a hard time even getting work. And so that little girl ends up being orphaned, and it's like, oh, they like never got the things they wanted ever. I mean, it was all for nothing. And it's just like, why this book is celebrated so much, I don't really know. But I do like it because it does sort of give a representation of, it's kind of like the anti-hero book. It's like, you can't help but just not really care for her as a person, and like she's just like the main character. And it kind of just shows you like what can happen when people have like no moral center, you know, like, because these are their real lives, and like they both end up in, I mean, they both end up 6 feet under. So it's like, not only was it for nothing, but like they've caused all this damage, especially to that kid with the surgery. And it's just, it's super unappealing. But it's just like kind of like a car accident. You can't not look. I'm like, I couldn't stop reading it when I was reading it, because I mean, her escapades in the city are just next level. She's really something. Like her ability to like convince her own self of her own self-deception and lies is, I mean, she is something. It's hard to look away. So I guess I'm going to stop here because I'm at time. I did do research on attachment disorders, and I'm going to do that in the next couple of days. Go over the styles of attachment disorders, and I will probably do something else on drug addiction here soon, and I think child abuse, but I'm still gathering research for that one. All right, I hope everybody has a good evening. Goodbye.